Hi, and welcome back to this part 8 of modeling a Mustang in Fusion 360. Like always, let's get straight into it. So last time I sketched the wheel arches by just using the canvas and the fit spline tool. So here I am selecting the profiles I want to extrude and extruding them across. So naturally, when you extrude into a body that's already been made, it changes to a cut tool, which is that red. The red tells you it's using a cut. But say if you want to join it on, there's that drop down menu at the bottom and you just click join instead. I should mention, these wheel arches at this point in time, they are purely for aesthetics. They're not functional, they're not to hide the axle or the coil springs or whatever. They're just purely for an aesthetic reason. I could have done them a bit better, but at this stage I was just, let's start getting some features in, and then we can make all the tweaks we want when we're nearing the end. So I'm happy with that. So what I do now is I want to create a sketch to create the wheel, the first wheel anyway. So click create sketch. I want to find the plane. That's the plane I want to use on. Then I hover over the wheel and I want to draw a circle. So I have that bound with my keys. So every time I press the letter C, it comes up with the create circle tool. And you can do that as well if you go into the sketch drop down list. On the if you move to the far right of any sketch kind of tool, so say it says draw 3-point circle, there's 3 dots on the end, and it's like, do you want to make a shortcut for this? And then click yes, and you type in whatever letter. So C for me is circle. That's how I was able to draw that so quickly. And here I'm extruding the wheel across. So I'm actually offsetting this from the plane because the wheel isn't as far out as the sketch plane I drew it on. But first I'll extrude it just to make it easier for myself. So there we go, just chucking in a random value. But yeah, I want to click and drag that and extrude it across. So because it's overlapping, it's actually used the cut tool here. And what I should go to do is in that very the bottom of those tools on the right hand side in the drop down list that says cut, I should click new body, and I make the mistake of clicking join. I go back to fix it later, but just worth mentioning now, you don't want to click join because when you go to move it or you go to mirror it or create a pattern out of it, you'll be patterning the whole car as well. So say you mirror the rear wheel on the right across to the left hand side, you'd also mirror the car and basically create an overlapping body, which is just a computer nightmare. So there, it was set to cut. So I need to edit that feature. And like I said, I clicked join, but I should have clicked new body, because now that becomes one body with the car. That's not its own separate thing. You can still edit it, but yeah, like I said, when it comes to mirroring things or moving things about, you'll be moving the whole car as well. So because wheels aren't perfect cylinders, they curve around at the edges, the next step I want to do is fillet the edges of the tyre. And again, this is a mistake I make looking back on it now that I know the tools I could have used. Yeah, this is a mistake, but I click the fillet tool, and in the top of that table on the right hand side it says fillet, and there's a drop down menu, and you can also click rule fillet. So if you click fillet as standard, you have to select each individual edge that you want to fillet. But had I have created the wheel as a new body and not joined it onto the rest of the car, then I could have used the rule fillet tool, where I could have clicked on the wheel and then just entered a value, and it would have filleted both sides automatically for me. So it would have saved me time, and it would be kind of reduce kind of my steps in the feature tree. And it's definitely good practice to do the steps that make the most sense. I know that sounds ridiculous, but sometimes when you're modeling for as long as I was during this project, you start to just make silly mistakes. But there's also a lot of mistakes I make just because I wasn't aware of them, like aware of better ways of doing it, or at least on this program. So here I'm creating a sketch. I clicked on the wheel, so you don't always have to click on a plane. You can just click on a body as long as it's got a flat surface. And then again, drawing a circle. No dimensioning here, just I'm drawing it to match that up. Realistically, I could dimension this bit here. There wouldn't be any harm in me doing that, but I don't think I do. And I could open up this model and add in some dimensions if I wanted to be a bit more accurate. But again, like I've said in previous videos, this is just like an aesthetic model. It doesn't have to be perfect. So yeah, extruding that to about 20 mil. Extrude cut. So I have a look at that. Turn off that canvas, and it doesn't look deep enough to me. I probably want about double the depth. So I do that by clicking edit feature in the bottom, and then just changing that measurement. So that depth is like 40 mil, something I'm happy with. So what you're now witnessing is kind of a bit of poor model procedure. So here I've just done a cut, and then I've just done a fillet, and I do that a few times in this project in later videos. But with things like this, I know I'm going to have to fillet this wheel again for other edges. So doing a cut after fillet, what you actually do is create more problems in your feature tree at the bottom, and it's just going to be more taxing on your computer. So I'm kind of happy with how that looks. And then I zoom in and I notice this. So what all this is here is a compute error. There's nothing wrong with it. The model is perfectly functional. I could take it out and 3D print it, and there would be no problems. But it is a good habit to get into. Whenever you spot something like this, just see if you can do something to kind of fix it. Just because, like, if you ignore a lot of your problems, then your CAD projects will fail eventually if you just keep ignoring the problems on it. So I just wanted to see if I could fix this, but I do recognize there is actually nothing wrong with what's going on. It was just a bit annoying, to be honest. So I was just seeing if I could fix it, and the fix was to just edit the feature and do absolutely no editing, just clicking OK again, and it worked the second time around. But yeah, so just a good habit to get into. Yeah. So that's looking a lot better. So as I've said before, this wheel is still joined on to the car, and I will change that shortly. But first, what I want to do is create a plane that is perpendicular to this view that I'm looking at, which sits halfway the distance between the two sides of the wheel. So if that makes any sense, you'll see what I mean in a minute. But the way I go about this is fairly moronic. So what I do is I create a sketch from one side and then extrude up to it. What I could be doing here is, instead of creating a sketch, is in the construct tool, the drop down at the top, there's construct offset plane, but there's also construct axis through cylinder or cone. So if the wheel was set to a body rather than joined onto the car, I would construct an axis through it, and then I would extrude a plane up to that object, and I would solve my problems. But instead, what I've done is I create a little sketch, and then I extrude up to it. So here's the construct drop down, so offset plane, and what I want is a plane that looks from that that's on level with where I've just clicked. trying to think what the plane would be called. The front to back plane. I don't know. A plane perpendicular to the side view. So perpendicular to what I'm looking at now. And you'll see there's that arrow on the right hand side, top right, and I can drag the plane. But what I should do is in the drop down menu on that table for the offset plane, there's, instead of distance, you can click to object. So it like move it up to object. So see where it says distance on that table? Then click to object, and then I can click on that sketch. There we go. And now the plane is where I want it to be. But from kind of being a bit more experienced now, I do know that's not the best way to do it. So like I said earlier, just construct an axis through the cylinder, through the wheel, and yeah, that plane that I've just created is actually really hard to see. So if you look left of the tyre and up a bit, it was just in the screen there, but I couldn't find it for a little while. Luckily I didn't need it right away, but yeah, sometimes that will happen when you create a new plane. Sometimes they create them massive, sometimes they create them tiny. I honestly have no idea why it happens, but so yeah, I was struggling to see it. So here we go. I'm changing the wheel from a join to a new body, and now I can create a component from it. So I do that by going into the bodies, finding the body, right clicking, create components from bodies. So now that's in the top tier of the tree on the left, and I can rename that by double clicking and then typing in wheel. You should get into a good habit of good naming conventions when modeling. So for a car, it's like really easy. There's only so many parts. It's like rear wheel right, rear wheel left, etc. But on like a project where, say you were making something like a chest of drawers, and there was a lot of parts of wood in it, because those parts of wood, like, you don't really know what their names are. They're just panels, and calling them panel 1 is quite difficult, and panel 2, etc. You should try and figure out like a good naming convention that works for you. So I mean, I still haven't mastered good naming conventions, but yeah, just something you should try and practice on. So now there's that plane that I couldn't find before. It was tiny, and now I dragged the corners out to make it a lot bigger. But now you see what I mean. It's a plane that's perpendicular to the wheel in the dead center. And what I'm about to do now is another thing that, yeah, if I'd have done it now, I just wouldn't have done it this way. But what I'm going to do is draw an axis. So like I said, you can just construct an axis. It's so much easier. So yeah, construct axis through cylinder, and then just click on the wheel. But instead I draw a sketch from a perpendicular view to this. Yeah, so just having a look at the wheel to make sure I know what I'm doing. What I want to do now is I want to turn on that wheel. I think I turned on the car first. Yeah, I didn't mean to do that, but turn on the active, like show the wheel, and then by clicking on a place and holding, so on a body, you get a little drop down menu of entities that you can't see directly, but there we go, there's that line. So that's that inner circle that I've cut in before, and then briefly, very quickly, I used the project tool. Again, that's another key I have bound. I bound that to the letter P because it's unused for anything else. But you can find the project tool in the drop down menu on the sketch thing, on the sketch kind of tools at the top. Yeah, and this is me making an axis. So yeah, just a bit, you know, something that, like, I needed to create an axis, and had I have known about this better way of doing it, I would have done it the other way. So yeah, just construct axis through cylinder. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm repeating this a lot, but it's like a tool that I completely wasn't aware of, and it's so much easier. So now what I want to do is I want to kind of create the because this wheel goes in, but then it kind of comes back out again. And so what I want to do is create a sketch from that new plane I've created that's perpendicular to this view, and then rotating it, and then having that join onto the current wheel to set me up ready for the next kind of stage. You'll see what I mean in a minute. Yeah, it was not the best explanation, but you'll understand what I mean in a moment. Yeah. What I could do from this angle is I could, in the sketch drop down menu, there's you can create points, and I could have created points at each kind of stage of the wheel from this angle, and then rotated it back round to the angle I'm about to work on, and I would have been able to see them rather than doing all those sketches. So in this part of the sketch, I actually dimension some things, which I don't think I've done at all for the rest of the project, really, like not proper constraining. And the reason why that is in the case of this, it makes it very easy to edit by having some dimensions in there. Not always, you know. Sometimes it's not necessary. Like if you're just going to be happy with it straight away, then fine. But I thought I was going to encounter a few errors with this, so I just thought I'd chuck in some constraints and just play on the safe side. So naturally, dimension is key bound to the letter D. So I mean, you can click it up at the top when you're in the create sketch environment. But yeah, when you're in a sketch, just press D and you get the dimension tool up. I'm fairly certain it's key bound to it anyway. It might have been me key binding it, but I think it's one of the ones they have actually bound. So there we go. Press D, click on those 2 points, just drag that out. And I mean, this is I'm about to say something that you should already know. I'd be kind of surprised if you didn't know it by now, but when you're working on a sketch, if the lines are blue, that tells you it hasn't been constrained yet, so you like things could still move about. But when the lines all go black, that tells you that it's been constrained and the lines can't move, so it's perfect. In other projects as well, you don't always have to constrain things. You don't always have to put in tons of dimensions. For projects with like lots of right angles, you can use like the tools where you click on a sketch line and it's like you can select parallel or perpendicular, which I do a lot more of now. I wasn't doing so much back then, but you'll understand what I mean. If you click on a sketch line without any tool on, then you get the kind of things at the top, and it's like you can make this parallel, you can make these coincident, you can make them collinear, and that's quite a smart way of constraining things. And you could also model in the parametric table. I might go on to that in a much later episode. I don't go into any of that in this particular project, but it might be something worth looking at. So now the lines are not blue anymore. They've all gone black, and that tells me that they are constrained. And what I do now is I fillet these, and this is moronic, really. So when you fillet, you actually kind of remove the dimensions. You don't remove them fully, but it changes the constraints. And what I should have done is just sketched it as the really angular thing, and then done the revolve cut I'm about to do, and then fillet it as a 3D object rather than as a 2D sketch. Because when you fillet that, you kind of, some of the lines are not looking so good anymore, and I had a few messages come up. So if I'd have just kept it in that very angular state, all of that would have been fine. So now creating a revolve. So I click that profile. Hide some things so I can see it. I want to hide the canvas really, but yeah. There we go. Profile, and then clicking the axis. Again, I should have just made this axis with the construct tool, but instead I sketched it. And there we go. And that creates that kind of shape I was on about earlier that kind of comes in and then comes back out. And I think like I was saying with the sketch, so rather than filleting those edges in the sketch, I could have just filleted it in this as a 3D object, and that wouldn't have caused the problems. Well, there weren't many problems, but the brief messages that came on screen. Yeah, so there we go. Got one wheel done. I know this wasn't. I know this was a bit longer than the usual episode. The reason why I wanted to do that is because I wanted to kind of cover the wheel in kind of one episode. I mean, there's still more to it, but the kind of main shape is done. Yeah. And then I'm just putting in. I created a quick sketch on the back, so it's a bit more wheel-like by extruding that cut in. It looks a bit more like a wheel with a tyre on anyway. There we go. But yeah, I think that's about it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed, and thanks for watching.